Welcome back to the second part 2 of a video about this. It's a series of videos about the Civil War that occurred in the United States of America so many years ago now. We're going to refer back to this picture in just a moment, but we're going to focus this session on the battles of the war. Starting back here in 1861, here's July 21st, the Battle of Bull Run begins as we go through our timeline of the events that occurred. Notice on March 8th and 9th, Hampton Roads, Virginia. Again, there's a blockade that occurs here with the Navy in the South Coast, cutting off supplies from Europe. And this was a plan to try, if we can cut off the supplies, the Union says we can have the victory. And remember the Merrimack and the Monitor, Merrimack and the Monitor, these ironclad ships. First time those are used in a war, and there wasn't really a winner on that, but it was definitely a key battle here, look, in this blockade that occurred. And then on March 9th, near Hampton Roads, Virginia, the two met and fought. And of course, it came to a draw. What happened later? April 6th, 1862, Shiloh, Pittsburgh Landing in Tennessee. Here we have it. In the Western theater of the war, Union generals Ulysses S. Grant and Don Carlos, there's a narrow victory that occurs there with the over the Confederate forces. 20,000 wounded and dead made casualties greater than all other previous U.S. wars combined. You see? And there we have it. There's Shiloh. There's Shiloh on the map in Tennessee. Moving on, we get closer as we move on to 1862 in July. A disastrous Union defeat of Bull Run. The Union commander George McClellan spent months training troops in Washington, D.C., and finally knowing that he must take the Confederate capital at Richmond, he marched his troops south. But Confederate General Robert E. Lee seized the initiative and attacked McClellan. In 5 battles over a period of 7 days, Lee defeated McClellan. So it's looking good for the South at this point. But it continues. Here's Vicksburg that we'll talk about. Very famous battle there. Here's Louisiana, Mississippi. As we see a timeline, but we also see a map of all that is occurring. And here's Antietam, Sharpsburg, Virginia, September 17th, 1862. This is an interesting one. Lee carried the war into Northern Territory for the first time. In the bloodiest single day of the war, Union forces, outnumbering the Confederates by 2-1, squeaked out a narrow victory. More U.S. soldiers died in Antietam than any other single day in American history. Nearly 6,000 men. Remember that picture I showed you earlier? Guess what? This is the Battle of Antietam. It's a scene from that battle, swooping across the country, or across the field there, as we move across the country in these battles. It was a horrific battle and historic battle. But let's keep going. It doesn't end there. There's Chancellorsville in May 1st through 4th, 1863. Outnumbered 2-1, Lee pulled off his most brilliant move yet. Breaking all of the textbook rules about warfare, he divided his army and sent one group under Stonewall Jackson to attack an enemy's right flank. Taken by surprise, the Union Army was defeated again. The Confederates, however, lost Jackson, who was mortally wounded by a nervous Confederate sentry, a guard there. His life was taken. This hero of Stonewall Jackson, it's a very, very moving battle, but was a victory, and was a brilliant move by Robert E. Lee. Chancellorsville. And look, here we have it. Chancellorsville. There's where it is on the map. Moving on, we go to Gettysburg. Now, Gettysburg, probably one of the most famous battles of all in the Civil War, July 1st through 3rd, 1863. Desperate to lower morale in the North and perhaps force Lincoln to negotiate peace, Lee took the Army of Northern Virginia into Union territory. In Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, in the largest battle ever fought in the Americas, Lee met with Union forces under General George Meade. After 3 days of fierce fighting, Lee had lost 1/3 of his army and had to retreat. It was a turning point in the war. Gettysburg. At that point, they weren't in their territory, and at that point, the North started having more victories, which is what we mean by the turning point. Here we go. Pennsylvania, Gettysburg. Moving on from there, on April 30th, July 4th, 1863, we have the Battle of Vicksburg. Remember what I was saying before? Vicksburg. It's quite a battle, too. On the Mississippi River. Well, Grant needed to take Vicksburg. He crossed the river, came up behind the city. After a month of fighting that cut the city off from its supplies, Grant's army settled in to starve Vicksburg into surrender. And victory came on July 4th, 1863. And interesting, it's the date of July 4th. Comes up quite a bit in our American history. There it is. Again, Vicksburg. What happened next? July 9th, 1864. So about a year later, we have this that happens. Atlanta, Georgia. The Battle of Atlanta. Look, there's Atlanta. Lincoln made his most successful general Ulysses S. Grant commander of the entire Union Army. Grant ordered General William Tecumseh and Sherman is the name that we mostly think of, General Sherman, to march his army through Georgia and destroy everything in its path. It's known as Sherman's March through Georgia. And you also hear of Sherman's March to Sea, driving the forces there. Okay? Again, Atlanta, Georgia, 1864. 1864. See if we can find it here. There's Georgia. And July 9th through September 1st, 1864. In the summer of 1864, Petersburg, Virginia, Grant took the Army of the Potomac south to attack Richmond. Again, Lee resisted him at every turn. In spite of suffering twice as many casualties as Lee, Grant kept fighting, and on April 2nd, Lee's line finally broke. The war was all but over now. It was just getting very difficult, very hard. like a flesh wound, getting worse and worse and worse. And finally, in 1865, is where we have the Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia, where Lee finally surrenders to Grant. Lee rode to his surrender in full dress uniform. The perpetually sloppy Grant was in private's uniform, with only his 2 stars revealing his status as a general. Grant gave his enemy generous terms of surrender. When Union troops began to cheer at the war's end, Grant ordered them to stop, saying, "The war is over. The rebels are our countrymen." And Grant actually showed character here by being gracious to all those considered, to all of those involved. And he said, when people wanted to rub it in, he said, "Stop that. It's over. Let's do what we need to do. Let's be peaceful and as kind as possible in the situation." And here they are, in a farmhouse, in Appomattox Courthouse, the city, the town. It was in the country in 1865. And then what happened after that? There was more that happens in what we call the aftermath of the war. And some other details I have not covered in this video that I may go back to and just mention as some interesting facts about some of the heroes, that maybe some more known and some less known, that occurred in this horrific war. But we'll find out about that the next time when you come back. So you be looking for part 3 in our series about the Civil War. And remember, learn something new every day.